I'd like to talk to you about inclusive, integrated rural economies. I think that this is the way forward for development in Nigeria. Everything we've talked about so far has been top-down. It's the things we think about, we plan for people, and then do to them. And also our philosophy on our program, which is the Business Innovation Facility. It's a DFID UK project in partnership with PwC London that we've been running. Basically, we start from the grassroots. Let me take the dairy market, which is one of the more difficult markets in Nigeria and also one of the least known. So I will take you through very quickly in 7 minutes the 7 I's of inclusiveness and innovation in rural economies. The first is innovation. Where we start is with the research, and it's research to understand the value chains, but more than that, to understand the constraints and to be able to intervene properly. For the herdsmen, the 3 big constraints were breed type. So the breed they have is good for meat, yet they live off the milk economy. So that's already a problem. Poor milk yields, good beef, they don't like to sell their cattle, but they want to live off the milk. So constraint number 1. That takes at least 10 years to introduce the breed improvement and so on. That was too big for us to handle. The second issue is water. To produce 1 liter of milk, you need 3 liters of water minimum. So they have to trek kilometers to find the water, but it also introduces nutritional stress, that whatever the cattle has eaten, it uses up all that energy in making the trek and coming back, and therefore there's nothing really to use to produce the milk. So what's the third one? It's fodder. The fodder that they have here in Nigeria is high in something called lignin. The lignin content is very high, so the conversion ratio of the food to milk is too low. But we found that in East Africa, they had napier grass, which is a variety of elephant grass, which we tried here. We persuaded the herdsmen to plant it. We provided the seedlings, we provided the foot pumps so that they could pump the water, and they had the manure from the cattle already. So with 20,000 to 30,000 herdsmen in Ladoga Grazing Reserve in Kachia local government in Kaduna, we decided to pilot it. So our philosophy is show and tell. Not just tell, show and tell. So we went there, we planted the grass with them, but in 45 days, the grass was over 2 meters tall. And we were looking to have an official launch, but the herdsmen couldn't wait. And their cooperative kept saying, we want to sell the seedlings. Why? Apparently they had done control trials. They had 4 cows separated on the old fodder, and another 4 cows, because they didn't really believe what we said, that they could increase their milk yield, and they fed them for 2 weeks on the new fodder. After 2 weeks, the cattle that was producing less than 1 liter of milk a day started producing 3.5. And by the 3rd week, it was up to 4 liters of milk a day. We tried it somewhere else where we said remove the new fodder, and it immediately dropped by 3 liters of milk a day. So we were absolutely sure that this really is a big improvement on their lives. Now, that's the first I. It's innovation, and it comes from research. There's a lot of opportunity for those kinds of studies to be done in partnership between Nigeria and Germany. The second I is incomes. So the women were selling their raw milk for 100 naira a liter. Good. Now with the increase, if you had only 10 liters before that you were producing a day, and now with the grass, you have 30 liters, not 10 liters. Imagine the increase in income. So the incomes could increase. But with the increase in incomes comes the other I, which is inclusion. Because it was then that we could talk to the women. It was then that the women were interested in learning how to make cottage yogurt from what they have. How to learn the proper milk hygiene, milk handling processes, and using the training in cottage yogurt as the entry point, because now they had a product they could sell for 600 naira a liter instead of what they were selling at 100 naira a liter. But imagine what this does. If you had only 100 naira a liter and the government says pay 50 naira in taxes, that doesn't make sense. But if the government did something that increased your ability to earn from 100 to 600 naira a liter, and they say, but pay 50 naira out of it, it's a no-brainer. You will, and you'll be very happy to make that kind of payment. So to have that inclusion, it's not just about getting the women involved and getting the young people in the grazing reserve involved. It was also about them being able to think about self-governance, starting that conversation. It's only when you then have inclusion that you can really talk about infrastructure. Because if you then bring water, it doesn't matter whether it is solar powered, however it is, you bring it to the rural community in there, who is going to maintain it? Who is going to manage it? The government cannot be present in every single community in the whole of Nigeria. But except you increase the incomes and the inclusion, the sense of inclusion, you cannot get them to do the self-help that will manage the infrastructure. So again, introducing the infrastructure produces an opportunity for Germany to work with Nigeria, as various people have already presented. There's a huge opportunity there, but I'm trying to link it back to the idea of smart cities, that you cannot have smart cities, as we saw in the beginning, if it is not inclusive of everybody in the community. And this is one way of doing it. I'm out of time, almost. From there, we have integration is the next thing. Because now that we have the idea of infrastructure in Ladoga Grazing Reserve, we've decided that why can they not actually process their own milk? So we've been looking and we've found a factory in a container that you can actually drop in the grazing reserve. Now that they're going to have excess milk, they can actually process the milk, because what happens is that they take their raw milk, they trek kilometers, get to town, sit down by the roadside to sell it, and then they buy yogurt in the sachets, and they're sucking on the yogurt in the sachets while they're waiting to sell their own milk. So, which seems ridiculous, but it's simply because they don't have the know-how and the infrastructure. That's another area for partnership. So the integration is the integration into the larger economy around them. Then you think about it, that's only one grazing reserve. I said there are 20,000 to 30,000 herdsmen there. There's around Kaduna, Kano, Katsina, and so on, there's at least 11 of those kinds of grazing reserves with similar numbers of people. So you can actually have one brand that goes around all the cooperatives in the grazing reserves, and they can be a mega factory if they can find the investment and the partnership that is required for that. All of this, when you take it to scale, is what produces the improvements in their livelihoods and their standards of living. And I think that at every single point of all the I's, innovation, increasing the incomes, striving for the inclusion, getting the infrastructure, pushing for integration into the wider economy, ramping up the investment, that is what brings the improvements in their livelihoods. You do this across a number of communities by checking what the innovation is that is required for them, and you can spur development around the whole of Nigeria. Thank you very much.